you through the session this morning. You'll see we're not going on to slides, and we've decided for this property maintenance and refurbishment framework, there's been a number of previous webinars giving some of the background to PCS and PCS tender, but we really, because the tender is live, I think it's really important today that we go straight into the actual systems. Quite conscious that some people might be joining today where this is really absolutely brand new as a way to get involved in tenders. So just to reassure you, as Fran said, we've got some slides which will literally take you through screen by screen how to get registered, get the documents and so on. And Fran has the recording. So, keep in touch with SDP, you will get those, but if there's any issues, just to make sure that you can go back, just in case we're going too quickly through the system. So I'm going to start with PCS, Public Contract Scotland, and show you very quickly just where to pick up the contract notice. And then we're going to move through to PCS tender. And we're going to spend the bulk of the time there looking at the actual structure of the tender, how to navigate the system, how to submit questions. And hopefully on that note, we'll finish before 11 with enough time for you to ask questions. I'm not here to represent Scotland Excel, so SDP can't answer questions on some of the content, particularly to do with the bid, but anything to do with the system we can help you with today. So just going to make a start here just now. So we're in Public Contract Scotland. If you haven't registered for PCS already, then there's a button on the right-hand side here where you can do that. Otherwise, you can log in. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of my... I'm already logged in. Clearly, I'm registered. And the quickest way to find this tender is to go to search for buyers. Type in Scotland Excel, who are the buying authority. For any of you who don't know, Scotland Excel buy on behalf of all the local authorities in Scotland, and particularly their contracts and framework contracts are available to other public bodies. So it is important, perhaps if you're interested in housing association work, this property maintenance framework would be available to housing associations, for example. So search for buyer through to the link on Scotland Excel. This is what we call a buyer profile. So you can obviously look at any public sector body to see. Here we're going to look at the current notices, but you can also have a look at maybe awards and contracts registers and so on. So click on current notices. And you can see here now the property maintenance one is here. Deadline's 24th of October. So obviously less than a month, so quite a lot to be getting on with. If any of you are thinking of putting this in your entry and waiting a few weeks, please don't do that. There's a lot to do. You need to get started onto this straight away. So as you come through to the view the notice, you'll see this big blue banner at the top, and this is telling us that the documents aren't held on PCS. You're going to have to go through to the PCS tender website first. However, what I tend to do is recommend in this full notice text, I won't go through it in detail, but it's quite a good summary in the full notice before you even go to PCS tender of particularly some of the, what they call the selection criteria, insurances, financial checks, some of the areas that you will need to be able to cover in order to bid. So have a quick look at the full notice. And then the next important thing is this, please search for project code and to make a note of this number, 21868. Because when we come through to the PCS tender website, we're going to use that to be able to pull the Scotland Excel tender out from the main list. So this is a live link, and this is what takes us through to an entirely different system. So quite a lot of you, I think, will be registered already with PCS, but if you haven't registered with PCS tender, please do that today. Ideally, it's very straightforward, just a few kind of simple details to fill in about your organisation. Get that done, and then once you're registered, you can log in and retrieve the contract details and documents. So I'm already registered. I'm doing this under a different ID because I'm going to go in as if I'm doing it from scratch this time, so you can see how that goes. So this is the home screen page. You've got details of your profile, managing your password and so on over here. But on the left-hand side, we want to be clicking on this, and here's another acronym, ITTs, which stands for Invitation to Tenders. So that's going to give us access. The screen, apologies in advance. I'm just going to try and increase the font size because it's very small. See how we go from there. So it brings us into this page here, ITTs open to all suppliers. Now that's a list you can see already about 4 pages worth of all sorts of open tenders. So what we want to do is just filter straight through to the Scotland Excel one. So we choose project code from that box, we choose contains, and then we put in our number 21868. Search is over here. And that's brought out just exactly the one we want. So it's nice and easy then just to click onto that to go through. So the next screen is one where, now this is quite interesting here, this printable view can be quite handy if you're interested to look, particularly if you're maybe not comfortable. The screens are very busy on PCS Tender. So quite often I start, and this gives you a PDF of the whole of the questionnaire, all the different elements, all the list of the buyer attachments. And it's sometimes quite nice to take that just off the system and have a look. And you can also share that with any subcontractors or partners that you might be working with. So if you do that, you're then ready to express an interest. PCS Tender's full of these little boxes that keep popping up, usually just saying, you've done this, do you want to? So you just have to confirm, okay. So the next page then is really the kind of main page that you're going to see in the setup for PCS Tender. So you get the title at the top. Under this tab, the ITT details, you've got information on the settings. So that, for example, further down on the screen will tell you, obviously, the deadline, 24th, and also the deadline for questions, which is a week before the 17th. Very important is the buyer attachments here. So I can't emphasize enough, before you get into the form, before you start filling in your name, your address, all the different details, you must click through to buyer attachments and download all the documents related to this tender. So you'll see they're organized in folders. There's clearly quite a lot of documents there. So again, for time reasons, don't leave this till last minute. So just quickly running through some of these certificates tend to be documents that are declarations. So you mainly just have to have these signed, scanned, and uploaded at certain points. The commercial offer is the pricing sheets. Electrical, joinery, painting. There's lot 15, which is multi-trades. So if you're covering more than two or more, I think, of the individual trades, you would fill in that document there. So these are the commercial offer. I'm going to come back to that just further on in the presentation. There's some guidance on Fair Work First and community benefits. The framework contract. So that's going to give you how the framework in general is going to operate, very important. And this is really, I would say, the critical one here. information and instructions, but in particular, the evaluation methodology. And that's going to tell you how the different scored elements, particularly the technical and the pricing, are going to be evaluated. Because at the end of the day, it is a competition, although a framework, Scotland Excel and the various members will decide. They haven't said yet how many people will get on. It's not winner takes all. But there will be certain standards in terms of, obviously answering all the questions and achieving really the best score you can get is what you need to be looking for. There's something called an SPD attachment, which I'll describe later on, which is for your subcontractors. And there's a response here, which is for some example projects. And again, I'll cover that later. The supplier response guide tells you how to use the PCS tender system itself. This could be handy. Okay, so up in the top here, mass download. I would click on that rather than individually trying to download every single document. Much easier, and then everything you're guaranteed. Pull down and keep it in a folder separately to the rest of your documents. Okay, so that's the buyer attachment. That's going to take you quite some time to go through. Start with this one, instructions first. But you're then ready to look at my response. And this is us still in this ITT tab. So again, once you've come through, you've got to click something here, intend to respond. If you don't do that, none of the questions will open up. You might see them, but there's no kind of boxes open to fill them in. Okay, and remember, all of this I'm doing in the slide pack. You'll see just a reminder of the different stages here. Okay, so in the response, there are two different sections that you can see here. And in fact, the commercial section with the pricing is also included in this technical response part here. So I'm going to run through both of these fairly quickly, and I'll just try and highlight, if I can, the areas where you need to maybe pay a bit more attention or that you might find a bit more difficult. So the idea of the qualification envelope is to identify various what procurement would call selection criteria. It's all about describing you, your organisation, either where you are now or kind of backwards looking, sort of maybe your experience to date, for example. So it's nothing to do with how will you run the tender or run the contracts, and there's nothing to do with pricing in this qualification section. Don't be alarmed about this 227 questions, by the way. So that's really quite a lot of those are just kind of conditional questions sitting at the back of others. So let me just move to the way here. The way that it's set up on PCS Tender is quite an old piece of software. So it's, as you can see already, it's quite wordy. It's not entirely easy to work through if you've not been used to it. So you do literally just have to kind of trek your way through the different items. They're all numbered. Quite a lot of them, like these early ones, are what I would call guidance. So there you've got your list of all the lots. There's the tender question deadline and so on. And as you move down, another important aspect of this tender is the geographical regions. So when you come to put your pricing in particular, you'll be able to choose a lot. So for example, flooring. And within that flooring pricing, you then provide a price for one or more of these regions. Okay, so we might come back to that later when we see the pricing sheet. So this is still all the preamble. You'll see quite a lot of text, various bits of guidance there. First question, have you read? Yes or no, fill in the date. And then pretty quickly you get down to this information about the bidder. Now, if you've submitted through PCS tender before, all of this will be pre-populated, but you still obviously need to check it. If you haven't, then you'll need to fill this in. And then obviously next time you use the system, that will be sitting in the background in your profile. So there's nothing in here at all that's particularly difficult, other than you're asked for a DUNS number. Now, you will get that if you're a limited company and you're registered at Companies House, and you can Google online to look up my DUNS number or apply for a DUNS number. Put in your registration number and the system will email you back. And it's something that procurement use to track back, usually into your accounts and so on. It's not mandatory, so if you can't find a DUNS number, don't worry for that. Address details, as you might imagine. Contact person, very important. Phone. This little asterisk here, by the way, if you don't fill in that field with the asterisk, the system won't let you submit. So it's very important, even though everything else you still have to fill in. It's a kind of technical one if these aren't filled in properly. Okay, email, internet, any parent companies, bidder legal status. So quite a lot of the questions are like this drop-down list. So as you're going through this, you might be spending quite a bit of time actually just looking at things. You must remember in the system to keep saving your changes. If you don't do that, the system might time out after a certain while. I'm going to save these. Annoyingly, they've changed the system so it pushes you right back up to the start of whichever section you're in. So I'm just going to have to come back down again to where we were. So I'll not save again so that we don't to and fro too much. Okay, so that's the first bit about the bidder, very straightforward. There's some general information about the size of your organisation. It asks if you're a supported business. Now that means if you've got 30% or more disabled or disadvantaged. So really for most people that's a no. Here there's a question, if you're a UK business, you just say not applicable. So again, sorry, I'm going through this rather quickly if you're not used to the screen. This section 2A is very important. So this is where you need to declare if you're bidding as part of a consortium, for example, and then you would be asked for more details of the partners that you're working with. More commonly, you would be asked, and the question comes later on, perhaps just about subcontractors as opposed to full partners. You're asked about a representative, which I would normally put in as whoever's the main authority in the business, the director. For some reason, you need to put in your date of birth and place. And again, a little bit of repetition, probably with some contact details. This question here, detailed information, I would just leave blank. And this part here, 2C, now this again is quite important, but it's very jargony in the way that it's written. If, for example, the selection criteria will include providing a number of projects, for example, or maybe a certification of some description, and if it's something that your subcontractor has and you don't, then you need to technically rely on them in order to meet those criteria. So if you say yes to that, you're then asked for this separate SPD response that we saw in the buyer attachments. And the SPD response is exactly the same section that we're filling in just now, up to part 3. So for the subcontractors, again, you need to get back to them fairly quickly and get them to fill that in. You're then asked, and this is quite common in PCS tender, where you're asked to attach a file. So it gives you all the ones they don't like. You can select a file. I'll just choose this one at random. open it up, confirm, and then you can see it attaches there, and you can just double check there, and you just delete it if it's one that you need to go in and replace. So that attached file you're going to see coming up in quite a few questions. Do you intend to subcontract? I think potentially quite a lot of people might do that for this tender. And again, you'll be asked to list the proposed subcontractors. Notice it's insofar as known, because some of you obviously, it's a 4-year framework, so you're not necessarily going to know absolutely every subcontractor. But if you do know them already, put them in here and include the SPD. If you have to attach a file here, and for example, it's SPDs from maybe 3 or 4 contractors, you can't attach them one by one. You've got to put them together as what they call a zip file. And in the slides, there are instructions. In fact, I think it's maybe even a separate set of slides, Fran, or a couple of slides on how to create a zip file. Another important thing, and it's quite easily missed, as you go through the document, you'll see this little triangle icon. As soon as you see that, it means that there's some form of attachment or guidance document or template. So that, I'm not sure if you can still see that. Hopefully you can. At the bottom shows that there's that SPD document that was in the attachments. You can pick it up here as well. Okay, so that's part 1 and part 2. Part 3 is going to look pretty horrendous on the screen because it's a really quite a long list of questions all about why you could be excluded, and it's normally to do with criminal convictions, illegal activity, and so on. So all I'm going to do is show you typical question, and we call these the yes/no questions. Most of them you say no to. If you say yes, most of the time you leave this bit here blank because there isn't any web address that relates to the answer. So what you need to do is work through all of these, and you can see already terrorist financing, there's some quite scary things there that they're asking about. There's a couple in the middle that I've just passed. Payment of taxes, social security, you need to say yes to those obviously rather than no, and then you're back on to answering no, presumably. There might be some further down where they ask about maybe you've had a, I don't know, a conviction or some sort of court action maybe related to health and safety. So it could be that you have to say yes, but you can, if you can show that you've addressed it and what was done to prevent it happening again, then it's at the discretion of Scotland Excel if they're happy to accept that. Okay, so again, quite a long list. But once you've done these, it's really, you're really quite a long way through the form. So it really won't take you very long to go through all these different ones. So that's part 3. We then get on to part 4. Now this is a bit more demanding, I would say, and this is where some of the pass-fail criteria might come in. So there's a couple of questions here. One about, are you on a professional register? And one about, are you on a trade register? So a professional register generally is particularly Companies House, for example, your registration number. A trade register could be something like, in fact, there are some mandatory ones, and we'll see them in questions further down as well. Gas safe, NIC, EIC for electricians. I can't remember, I think it's SNPF perhaps for the kind of heating, plumbing area. So anything like that where you're on an official register, you can add in there. So here are the selection criteria guidance. So again, it's a little bit of a repeat of the question above. So please check if you're in any of these lots. These are the qualifications that you need to confirm. So if that is the case, you say yes, and there's some questions about the membership the number, that sort of thing. You might here have a web reference to that registration. Okay, so that's the membership. And this is us still in the qualification, by the way, section. So under financials and economic, there are levels of insurance. So all you need to do is say either yes, you have it, or no, but I commit to obtain it. And particularly maybe not applicable if it's employers and you're a sole trader. Okay, so again, very straightforward. On the insurance, on the financials, you're not being asked to supply copies of accounts or anything like that, particularly at this stage. Scotland Excel will look at a system called Equifax Protect, and that's where they will do a financial check based on the accounts that you lodge. I think it's a good idea quite early on to check what your rating is in Equifax, in particular if it returns a warning. We've had clients before who were excluded from a tender, and on that basis that didn't pass an Equifax or Dun & Bradstreet check, and it turned out that Dun & Bradstreet hadn't uploaded the latest accounts, and it was their error, it wasn't our client's error. So I think it's definitely worth to check. And if you have checked, then I would put in a piece of text here just to say we've checked and here's what our rating is. So that's financials. Technical and professional ability, again, a very important part here is that you will need to supply examples of relevant experience. I have submitted a question to Scotland Excel. I haven't had anything back quite yet because it only went in yesterday to confirm whether it's examples for each of the lots that you bid for at this stage, or if it's just a number of, I think it's 2 projects that you put in something that covers all the lots somehow that you're bidding for. You can rely on some of your personnel. It's maybe their experience for a different organisation, or subcontractors as well, consortium members. So it leaves it quite wide open. But I suppose ideally you're really looking for your own references under your own business if you can. Again, one of these little links, so that's a template there that you need to use, and then attach. And again, I think it's 2 examples. I just need to clarify whether it's the past 5 years or 3 years. I'm just waiting to hear back what that is. And then the final part of this qualification section, what proportion do you intend to subcontract? So that will be really an approximation, I think, at this stage. Okay, and then the very last questions, there are 2. The wording's very odd in these, so really all they're asking for is if you have a quality management system that's audited by an independent body, a third party. So that tends to mean ISO 9001 for quality. Health and safety, it might be 45001, or it could be one of the SSIP schemes. So CHAS, SMAS, WorkSafe, Safe Contractor, these kind of official health and safety schemes. So if you have that, you can say yes and move on. If you don't, you have to say no, and then there's a little text box, and you would have to give an overview of what systems you do have in place that are maybe internally audited. In the slides, we've given some guidance on all the different things you might need to cover if you don't have ISO. So have a look at the slides when you get them back today. And environmental works exactly the same way. So if you don't have ISO 14001, you say no. If you do, you say yes, obviously, and then give an overview of what you do have in your environmental management systems. And then lastly, a signature at the bottom, which is literally just typed in. So I would have been saving changes probably all the way along, but I'm now going to just quickly save and exit. And that, I think, if I was you, I would be, as soon as you've read all the buyer attachments, I'd be trying to get that qualification response filled up and really out of the way as quickly as possible. And then you can really concentrate on the important bit, which is this technical response. Okay, so again, it looks like a lot of questions, but some of them will be what we call conditional questions. And there's a bit of preamble. What's important to note for the technical response is that you're going to get scored on a number of questions, and then other elements are not scored. So please refer back to that information and evaluation document, and it will give you a nice clear table of exactly how that's managed. And most of it is also stated on the screen as well. So you get another rerun of the lots and the geographical areas that we saw earlier and some of the deadlines. You then ask a question about your ability to service and if you've got any restrictions. So I think the example they gave here is if you're bidding for Region 1 but can't serve Inverclyde Council within that, please use this section to indicate that. So anything at all here that's a kind of restriction that sometimes people in some areas will say, oh, we can do highlands, but not the islands or that kind of thing as well. So that one's not scored. And we're now into what we call the master technical section. So regardless of the lots that you go for, you have to fill in all of these questions. And again, we'll just run through them fairly quickly just so you see how they're presented. So the first one is a tick the box for living wage. Living wage, you probably know, I think in the last week or so, has now gone up to £10.90 an hour. So you need to be sure when you're answering that you're correctly keeping to that, for that. That's the new level. Fair Work First. There's a guidance document, I think you maybe remember, and it's referred to here as well. So please read that first, and then you get 680 words to reply to all these different bullet points. As a general kind of tip, I would say a lot of the questions you're going to get have all these different areas. And if you miss out any of these, you're going to be scored down. So what I tend to do is, rather than trying to fill it in straight away, is to work offline. I sometimes even do it handwritten, to be honest, and just have my headings and some bullet points. You know, what are the things that I want to say against each of these points? Because 680 words is really not so much to cover all these different areas. So that principle of kind of plan first and then write. Also, if you prepare it in Word, because you'll see these boxes have different characters. So if you type in, you'll see there's a counter at the bottom telling you how many you've got left. But if you do it in Word, you can cut and paste over. I think you need a Control V to paste it in. And usually that's a lot easier than typing it all straight through. So Fair Work First, and that has a score against it as well. I think 5 points, if I remember. And community benefits, initially you're asked to agree yes or no, which obviously you'll have to say yes. And then you're given different sort of requirements, if you like, once that community benefits kicks in. And then beyond that, there's a question about supported businesses and social enterprises. Do you commit to engaging with them over a certain level of business? So again, you'd need to be saying yes to that. And we're then into one of the bigger, what I would say, scored questions. So this is worth 10%. And again, you'll see the same format. So really quite a lot of whatever that is, 8 or so bullet points. Here you're given more boxes. So there's 2 text boxes, so it's 1,000 words, but there's a lot to cover in that. So A, you need to address every single point. But B, you need to do a bit of planning to make sure that you use your words effectively. Don't do big, long, rambling text. Don't do the, I would call the sort of blah-de-blah, we're high quality, we're the best in the business, we'll meet your every dream, da-da-da. Keep it really nice and neutral, full of evidence, full of facts, and keep it focused on the project going forward. You're not writing this as a historical piece. It's all about, we will do this, we will do that. And read the question really carefully. Try to do it as a team. If you can, just get somebody else's eyes on the text as well. So you can see here, you'll have to divide your answer into 3 different blocks. The next question here, and this is still the master one across all lots, again, very demanding, I would say. The whole carbon reduction agenda is very big in all Scottish public sector tenders and UK-wide. So again, you've got 2 text boxes, but this is all about, what have you put in place just now, and what is there going forward that's going to address environmental impact. Also look for, I think there's a question here, yes, how can you measure the reduction in carbon? So for many organisations, to be honest, people are maybe not doing that formally, but there are a number of organisations, and SDP has a very good link on their website who produce tools that can do that. Fran can correct me, but I think there's actually a webinar on Thursday as well for a net zero tool if you want to sign up for that. I'd highly recommend it because this is an area where people routinely lose loads of marks because they just haven't read around enough to think of what they want to commit to going forward. It's not just recycling your office paper anymore. It's got to be a much more embedded in your business. So carbon reduction, so that's another 10 out of the 40 points score. You've got to accept the framework conditions, yes or no, any charges or anything about to happen with the company that you need to declare. And then we get into the second part of the technical document, which is about selecting the lots and the geographical regions. And depending here on what you tick, that will open up the tender documents for the questions further down, for the lot specific questions as well. Okay, so you can see the first ones don't have anything. So here's roofing. You're asked whether you can cover commercial properties, domestic or both. So that's just a drop-down list. And then again, another 10 marks questions, very important. You've got 2 text boxes that you can use to fill in the answer and another list of really quite big questions, I would say, that you're going to have to sit down and plan around to get the answers to delivery for works. And a chance, particularly within the lot, if it's flooring or, I don't know, plumbing, if there's a particular professional membership. So that's going to repeat a little bit what you had in the qualification section. Okay, so that's more or less the same questions depending on which lot that you've decided to open up. Okay, so to say, I apologise, it looks long and lengthy on the screen, but actually you don't have to worry about what to upload or email to anyone. It's all quite clear in the document. Here's the certificates we talked about earlier. I think there were 3 of them. So that's where you would attach those. And if you need a letter of authority, tends to be maybe for a bigger organisation. If somebody local is signing it, maybe somebody higher up needs to authorise that. And then that's the end of the technical envelope. In the commercial section, something really very, very important for this tender overall is the fact that all the pricing is going to be based on what's called the National Schedule of Rates. Some of you might be familiar with that, but others, certainly in my experience, are probably not. But it's nationally agreed rates for certain types of works, and you can see they come in different versions here. There's 5 listed. You will have to contact the National Schedule of Rates NSR Management, and there's a link in the tender documents for that, because you'll have to buy a copy of the schedules. The full price for the full license is many hundreds of pounds, but they do offer a monthly subscription. So you can register for that, and you can work out, if you're doing all trades, you're going to need to buy all of these for the month to get access to the rates. If you're only doing a single one, you're only going to need one or other of these as well. And hopefully we'll get some clarity on which rates apply to which of all the 15 lots in particular. So I'm going to show you actually in the commercial sheet itself, I think is probably the easiest. But again, you have to choose which lots you want to price. Tick there, and then that will open up the boxes further down where you can attach this, what we call the commercial offer attachment. And that's the spreadsheet that you're going to fill in with your pricing. Okay. And then that's effectively, that is the end of the form at the end of the commercial section. I'll just very quickly, just conscious of the time, but I just want to cover another couple of things that are important. So this is us back, when you save and exit, you come back to the summary page. There's a very important facility for messaging, and you can see already there's quite a lot of activity. So if you click on received messages, once you're registered and expressed an interest in this particular tender, you'll get these direct through to your email, whatever email you use. But it comes from, I think it's autoalert@bravosolution.co.uk, so it doesn't immediately look like PCS tender, doesn't look like Scotland Excel, so just please watch out for these. I can see an important message has just been posted here, and there's some other clarifications. So you can go in and read the message, and there's some clarification on the years as well that we mentioned earlier. Okay, so again, if you're starting out, read your buyer attachments. I would go into the messages and go back and read all the messages. If you've not, clearly, if you're just registering now, you won't have picked up on those. There's quite a lot already to catch up with. You can create a message. So again, quite straightforward. You just type in the text and send, and that will go through to Scotland Excel. You can draft a message and keep it till later, but I would just encourage you, this is the time now to get the questions in as quickly as possible. But please try and read the answers that have already been issued so that Scotland Excel don't get bombarded with the same question every time, because it's a bit annoying, and it's obviously time consuming for them to have to repeat the same answer as well. So that messages tab, very important, and you'll get an alert as well through your email system. So just going back then to the ITT details, I'll just go back and get out of this question section. And to my response, that's fine. So once you've filled in everything, obviously you need to check and double check, make sure that you've got everything uploaded, that the files aren't kind of 0 kilobytes and corrupted, You're then ready to submit your response. So when you do that, it says, please ensure you've reviewed your response. And if I just said, yes, okay, it's no doubt going to come back and tell me that there's all sorts of elements that I've not covered yet. Let's see if it's going to let me. do this. Yes, that's quite strange actually. Normally it would come back. To just double check that that's working okay, but normally it'll come back and tell you which things you haven't filled in. If you do submit your response, it's logged, and you can go back and change it and resubmit it all the time right up to the deadline. Don't necessarily do that clearly, and in general, don't submit. Try and leave at least a couple of days if you can before the deadline so that everything's in and properly checked. I'm just going to share, Fran. I'm not sure if I need to come out. I think I might just need to. Here. So I've just picked up, this is the multi-trades one, and this is this national schedule of rates. And what you're asked to do is for each region that you want to bid for, if you're bidding for, if this is multi-trades, the only information you need to provide here is whether against the rates, would you bid for 10% higher than the rates, in which case you'd put a 10 in. Would it be 5% less, in which case -5, or 0% would be you're happy to go with the rates as stated in the schedule once you've had a look at them. So you can see already it's absolutely crucial to get these rates as soon as possible. And there's also no specification or scope of works issued by Scotland Excel. You've got to go to the preamble section of the rates to get hold of that to see exactly the activities that this plus or minus percentage is going to have to cover. So for some people, that's quite normal way of pricing, but for others, this could be very unusual. Where the rates aren't applicable, it could be that, and it won't be Scotland Excel, obviously, it will be the different councils who choose to use this framework. They might come back and choose to use hourly rates, so you're asked to provide. And obviously if it's for joinery work, there'll just be joinery rates here and so on. And then there's a couple at the bottom. You're asked for a percentage overhead on materials, on plant and consumables, profit on subcontractors, so that's whatever percentage. And again, in each region, you might make that a different percentage. And then overtime work. Again, not guaranteed that you get that, but what would be your percentage over and above? So quite a lot on the pricing. So please open up these documents, and if there's anything you're not sure of, you need to ask that as quickly as possible. I think, Fran, I'm just going to stop now. I think I'll go back to the